Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Happiest Hour on Earth. I'm your host Chris, and my other amazing co-host Emily is not here tonight, so that means really fun. You guys get to hear me talk to myself for a good couple of minutes, but it's really exciting. Even if it looks like I'm just talking to myself, like if you were in this room right now, I'd look like a crazy person. However, once I upload this to the podcasting platforms and YouTube, it's like we're chatting together. And so if you want, go ahead and leave a comment on YouTube so we could start a dialogue. I love talking Disney with you guys. You guys bring up some amazing points and amazing insight, and we both love hearing from you guys. I think even on Spotify now, you could add a comment to an episode. So try that out. Be the first person to comment on an episode. We would love that. But tonight is going to be really fun. Today, when this episode comes out, it is Friday the 13th, and we are going to be talking about some unlucky Disney movies. These are some really crazy ideas that were in production and then just never saw the light of day. And I saw some of these and I just thought how crazy these were. They're super fun. Together, we're going to be learning about some of these movies that I'm sure you probably haven't heard about. Maybe you've heard of some, but maybe you haven't heard of others. It was really cool to dive into this and see those movies that were a little bit unlucky. In the past, we've done an episode about abandoned park projects, and that was really fun too. If you haven't listened to that video, I could pop it up right here on YouTube and you could go check that out because there were some crazy projects that they were working on and it never came to fruition. So definitely check that out. But before we jump into this episode, if you're on YouTube, go ahead and click that subscribe button and hit that like button. It really helps out our show so much. And we're on our way to 1,000 subs, which is really, really exciting. We post new episodes every single week. There might be one week coming up where we don't post because we'll be in Hawaii. We're so excited for that. It's going to be a blast, but it really helps out our show a lot. So definitely go do that. If you're listening on a podcasting platform, go ahead and click that follow button and rate us 5 stars or write us a review. That would mean so much to us. Also, we have some links in the description below that you could save on Disney products, Disney vacations, and that helps support our show as well. So you could definitely go check out those there. But without further ado, let's get into these unlucky Disney movies. All right, so this first one I think is going to make a lot of people excited because we are in September. It's also Friday the 13th, a little bit spooky, but we're getting close to Halloween. And this first one that I saw and I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder what they would do with this. This was in 2003, and there were some talks and some pre-planning to make The Nightmare Before Christmas 2. Oh my gosh, wouldn't that have been crazy? And so I wrote what I found here on that movie. It said, in 2003, Disney began to consider producing a sequel, but rather than using stop motion, they wanted to use computer animation. Burton convinced Disney to drop the idea. He said, I was always very protective of The Nightmare Before Christmas, not to do sequels or things of that kind, you know, Jack visiting Thanksgiving World or other kinds of things, just because I felt that the movie had a purity to it. It was important to keep that kind of purity to it. And so he came up to Disney, and you remember he didn't actually direct the movie. Henry Selick directed the movie. However, Tim Burton produced it and, you know, had a big hand in it. But he was like, I don't want to visit another world. I don't want to go to Easter or Thanksgiving or anything like that. However, the proposal seems very interesting because, you know, we have gotten Hocus Pocus 2. I believe Hocus Pocus 3 got the green light, right? There's a lot of like revisiting movies from that time period. And so kind of interesting. Also, in October of 2023, so last year, Henry Selick, the director, stated that he would like to do a prequel film about how Jack became king of Halloween Town. But the following month, Burton said that he did not want to see any further projects in that universe. It makes sense. I'm sure a lot of filmmakers like to, and like Walt too, we talked about this recently, that Walt Disney never really liked sequels. He wanted to finish a project and let it live by itself as one whole complete thing. And he didn't want to revisit stories. And so for decades upon decades, they never did a Disney sequel. So I understand where Tim Burton is coming from here. However, I mean, he's done some other ones, right? Like Alice in Wonderland sequels, Beetlejuice we just got, which we haven't seen yet, but we need to see it. But for something as special as Nightmare, and it makes sense with the Christmas and Halloween theme, it'd be weird to visit other things. I understand where it's coming from. Now, the whole idea of not using stop motion and using computer animation, I hate that idea. I think Nightmare Before Christmas is Nightmare because of that stop motion technology, and doing it in a different animation style would have been awful. You know, if they ever do it in the future, they have to do stop motion. That's kind of the core to that Tim Burton kind of creepiness. Like the way they move is just not what we're used to. So it kind of puts you in that, I don't know, just puts you in that darker mindset that Tim Burton has, that quirkier mindset, right? To use clay to make a movie. It fits so well. So would be interesting, but I'm glad they haven't yet. And I'm definitely glad they haven't gone the computer animation route. Next up, keeping it on sequels. I thought this was very, very interesting. And so something to know before we get into this, and we have a few sequels, and then we're going to go to some originals and some other surprising ones as well. But before I get into this, I think it's very important to bring up that there was a animation division at Disney called Circle 7 Animation. And that was created by Disney because they didn't know if that partnership with Pixar was going to continue. Remember, there was that whole back and forth between them. Disney tried to produce some computer animated films by themselves, Chicken Little, that kind of thing. Dinosaur was another, and they just were not that good. And so Disney set up this division pretty much saying like, you know, you guys could focus on some movies in case Pixar partnership doesn't go through, or you could do like sequels to movies and things like that. So that later became defunct once Disney bought Pixar, and then, you know, they reworked scripts and all of that stuff. But in 2005, there was a movie idea being worked on called Lost in Scaradise, which would have been a Monsters, Inc. 2. Now, listen to the synopsis. In 2005, Circle 7 animation screenwriters Bob Hilgenberg and Rob Muir wrote a film treatment for a sequel of Monsters, Inc. The film would have focused on Mike and Sully visiting the human world to give Boo a birthday present, only to find out that she had moved. After getting trapped in the human world, Mike and Sully split up after disagreeing on what to do. However, it was canceled following the shutdown of Circle 7. In 2013, Pixar produced a prequel, Monsters University. Now, a Monsters sequel would definitely be interesting. I would have loved to see what had happened with Boo. I think that is one of the most heart-wrenching endings, with a positive note too. You know, Sully putting that door together thanks to Mike getting all the pieces and opening it up, asking for Boo, and then you hear Kitty. I mean, beautiful ending. So, you know, you kind of don't want to ruin that. But man, it would be so cool to see them reunited. Because you see that at the end of the movie, and then we have Monsters at Work, which is a sequel series, and there's just no mention of Boo. That would have been so cool if they kept up together. Would be really, really interesting to follow that story. But that never actually happened. They came out with the prequel, and we love Monsters University. So I am very glad that they made that. Next up, we have another Pixar sequel from Circle 7 Animation, and this one was also 2005. And it was supposed to be a sequel to Finding Nemo, but it was not Finding Dory. Now, this is a crazy synopsis as well. It says, in 2005, Disney was going to make a sequel to Finding Nemo without Pixar's involvement by the now defunct Circle 7 Animation. Although it never went into production, a script for the Circle 7 version was uploaded to the official Raindance Film Festival website in 2018. It would have focused on Nemo reuniting with Remy, his long-lost brother. Marlin later gets captured and sent to an aquarium, so Nemo, Remy, and Dory venture to save him. After Disney bought Pixar in 2006, Circle 7 was shut down and their vision of Finding Nemo 2 was canceled. in 2016, Pixar produced their own sequel, Finding Dory. So I guess instead of Finding Dory, it would have been Finding Marlin because he would have gotten captured or something along those lines. Interesting to bring a brother into it. I'm sure they could have done that pretty well. However, Finding Dory is just so special. And I love that there's multiple reasons why it's called Finding Dory. You know, Marlin and Nemo are trying to find her, and then her parents have been trying to find her ever since she was a kid and got lost. And I think that was just absolutely perfect. I couldn't see it going a different way. This is a very interesting idea, but it eventually was unlucky and got axed and brought in with a new storyline. Now this next one, we're going to go back a few decades. I'm talking 60s, because in 1967, Disney was thinking about making let's do it like this. There's a lot of films that are based off of old, Brothers Grimm fairy tales, old fairy tales, right? You got Snow White, Cinderella, even Tangled, Little Mermaid. Now there's there's Hans Christian Andersen, all that stuff, but fairy tales. Now there's one fairy tale that they were going to do a movie on, and this was going to be Hansel and Gretel, which, if you don't know this story, let's just jump into this here. It says, this proposed feature was to be an adaptation of the Brothers Grimm tale Hansel and Gretel, involving a brother and a sister threatened by a cannibalistic witch living deep in the forest in a house constructed of cake and gingerbread. Now, I know that some movies have some dark themes. Snow White, Cinderella, those movies actually had much darker stories, and Disney changed them. They made it a little happier. They cut out some rough details that were in the original stories. But I don't know what they could have done with Hansel and Gretel. Sorry, I keep going Hansel and Hansel. I think I switched it a couple times. But I think that story would have been a little too intense for Disney to do. Even if they made it a little lighter and a little more magical, it's still about a witch that's trying to eat kids. So I'm glad they didn't go this route. I look back, and even if it was created, I don't think people would be like, oh, I love that 60s Disney film like Hansel and Gretel. I grew up with it as a kid. No, I just not good. I don't like that at all. So I'm glad that one did not go through. Now, speaking of witches, I think this was a very interesting one, and this was made, but there's a crazy story here that I just had to bring up because it was very unlucky for Disney. So in the 1930s, Disney was going to make The Wizard of Oz. Now, listen to this story here. Originally, this was meant to be Walt Disney's second film after Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, but the film rights were lost to Samuel Goldwyn, who originally intended to produce it as a standard musical comedy with Eddie Cantor as his star. However, Goldwyn sold the rights to Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer in 1937, and 2 years later, the studio released their own version of The Wizard of Oz. The Wizard of Oz is such a classic. We got that really cool detail of the black and white to the color. It's also live action, and gosh, from Judy Garland to all the other characters who I don't know the actors' names, to the witch. Oh my gosh, they all play their roles so well. A classic, goes down in history, right? Now, this was going to be Disney's second film after Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. That makes it sound like it was going to be an animated film. And I'm sure that would have been amazing. Imagine, coming off of Snow White and doing a grand story like The Wizard of Oz and doing it in that amazing animation style. That would have been so amazing. However, we probably wouldn't have known The Wizard of Oz that we had today. So influential in filmmaking history. And so even though it was unlucky for Disney to lose those rights, and it would have been really cool to see that, I'm so glad that Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer made their version in 1939 because it's just such a classic. But man, that would have just changed the course of film history forever. Now, another story that Disney almost made, and I think this would have been really interesting because a movie did come out decades later, but Disney in 1936 was trying to make Peter Rabbit. So the story goes that this was a proposed animated film based on the Peter Rabbit books written by Beatrix Potter. However, she refused Walt Disney's offer to make the film. 82 years later, Columbia Pictures produced a live action / CGI film adaptation version. Now, I haven't seen that version. I'm sure it's very kid-like. I don't know. I mean, I'm talking about Disney movies. Of course, they're all kid-like, but more like silly and goofy kind of thing. So it would have been interesting to see Disney's take on Peter Rabbit. We read this story to our son a lot. But yeah, I mean, such a classic, and Disney, takes a story and really dives deep into the characters and does this whole thing. So that would have been very interesting. But another one here that has been unlucky on multiple fronts is the movie Don Quixote, that they have tried to make a movie of 3 separate times. They tried making it in 1941, they tried making it in 1951, and then they tried making it 50 years later in 2001. And so the synopsis here goes, and it's based on like a Spanish novel from way back in the day, I think the 1800s, but it would be about a man named Alonso Quijano, maybe, a retired country gentleman nearing 50 years old, and he lives in an unnamed section of La Mancha with his niece and a housekeeper. He has become obsessed with books of chivalry and believes their every word to be true, despite the fact that many of the events in them are clearly impossible. Quijano eventually appears to other people to have lost his mind from the little sleep and the food that he was getting, and so much reading. He decides to become a knight with his food-loving squire Sancho Panza, and he sets out on a hilarious misadventure. So they're trying to do this multiple times, and for some reason kept getting shut down. I could see them maybe revisiting this tale in the future. I just don't know if it would work. Most of their films, for a very long time, have been female-led, and I think that there's something that just works there with Disney. Also, if it is male-led, I feel like it's still on the younger side, coming of age type stories. And so this one being like a 50-year-old man as a main protagonist, I don't know if it would work. However, we see that with Up, right? He was definitely way over 50. And so I guess we have examples of that. Maybe they'll revisit that. It would be interesting to see a story finally come together and a movie that finally, works after they've tried 3 other times to make this movie. But yeah, I just had to put that one in there because I thought it was very interesting that they've been wanting to try to do that for so long. Now, this next one would have definitely been interesting. I've seen more and more people show their appreciation for this movie, where I didn't really grow up with it as much. However, it has one of the best songs in the world in it, and we love the movie. It's just not one that we used to watch all the time growing up. And on this note too, there's a lot of canceled Disney movies over the decades. However, I just wanted to pick 10, and there's some, you could look into this too. There's some that might interest you a little bit more. There's a lot more originals that were there too, but there wasn't as much known about them. And so some of these sequels, the plot sounded a little more interesting because we already know the characters, but this is another sequel, and Disney was planning on making a Hercules 2. And there is Hercules Zero to Hero, but I believe that's almost a sequel combining the show, like a couple of episodes of the show or something like that, and that served as a movie. But they were originally going to do a Hercules 2 called The Trojan War in 2001. And so the story goes that Disney planned to propose direct-to-video sequel to Hercules. Hercules is now living in Athens with Megara and their daughter Hebe. However, when an old friend named Helen is captured by the evil Paris of Troy, Hercules joins the united Greek army as they head out to war. However, this war will create revelations, and Hercules finds an old friend who eventually goes missing. So I do not remember the storyline for Zero to Hero, but this sounds definitely very interesting. Disney had done a lot of like direct-to-video sequels around this time. There's like Aladdin 2 and 3 and Jungle Book 2 and a lot of things like that. And, they were never that great. However, I did love A Goofy Movie too. That was That was awesome. And I need to rewatch that one for sure. But I think Disney does sequels a lot better now than they did back then, because they would take right? We had Peter Pan 2 as well. We just watched that actually recently, and the ending is just very, very sweet. But a lot of those were just decades after the original. Animation style different, music very different, and it just doesn't feel like it belongs with the original. But I think Disney found their stride with sequels. I know we talk all the time about too many sequels, but I think there's a lot of good sequels they have created. And the sequels are now like theatrical releases rather than a limited budget with a direct-to-video sequel. So that was a weird time for Disney when they were doing a lot of that kind of thing. But we have two more here, and they actually go hand in hand. Are you ready? Okay. So in 1991, Disney was hoping to do a special on a Pixar short that came out. And if you guys remember this Pixar short, it was called Tin Toy, and it featured a very scary looking CGI baby. They've come a long way when it comes to computer animating a baby or just humans in general. But this was a small short that they did a long time ago. Everyone loved that short, and a half-hour television sequel to Tin Toy was considered. And it was supposed to be called A Tin Toy Christmas. So it's supposed to be like a Christmas half-hour special instead of the 5 minutes that the short is. And they were going to do that. But Pixar felt convinced that they could produce a full feature film instead of a half-hour Christmas special of Tin Toy. And that's actually what led to Toy Story. And so I'm so glad they didn't do that special, and they developed it and created the first full-length computer animated movie, Toy Story. Oh my gosh, the start of everything. So monumental. Love that film so much. And so that leads us to our last one here. And I thought this was very interesting. There was, in 2005, supposed to be a Toy Story 3. But not the Toy Story 3 that we know and love today, with Andy going away to college and giving his toys to Bonnie, and that last scene that always makes us cry. This was going to be very, very different. So the original version of the 2010 film of the same name by Disney's Circle 7 Animation was to focus on Andy's mother shipping a malfunctioning Buzz to Taiwan, where he was built, as the other toys believe that he will be fixed there. After Buzz has been shipped, they find out that the company has issued a massive recall. Fearing Buzz's destruction, a group of Andy's toys, Woody, Rex, Slinky, Mr. Potato Head, Ham, Jessie, and Bullseye, venture out to rescue Buzz. At the same time, Buzz meets other toys from around the world that have been recalled, including several Transformers toys. After Disney bought Pixar in 2006, Circle 7 was shut down and their version of Toy Story 3 was canceled. But in 2010, Pixar produced their own version of Toy Story 3. So glad they did, because Toy Story 3 is one of our favorite Pixar films ever. Oh my gosh, we grew up with Andy, right? And when he was going to college, we were coming to grips with the fact that we were adults and, we can't play with toys all day, all these kinds of things. I'm so glad they changed it. It almost seemed like they were taking Toy Story 2. There's the whole going to Japan, the toy convention or the museum over there, and doing that with Buzz, but in Taiwan, and they're going to destroy him because of the recall and they're trying to save him. It would have been cool to see, like a different country and the toys just experiencing that different country. But what we got with Toy Story 3 is just absolutely incredible. And so I'm so glad that they went that route. Now, who's to say Toy Story 5 won't venture out a little bit further? I feel like we usually stay within the same area for Toy Story, but maybe we do a longer road trip. Woody is now working the carnivals, saving toys and giving those toys to kids who need them, right? So we might see a bigger scope there. So I'm very curious with that, but only time will tell. 2026, Toy Story 5 comes out. And so I'm so excited to see what that's going to be about. But thank you so much for joining this episode. Emily should be back next week, which is always so great to have her on the show, of course. But then after that, we will actually be gone in Hawaii, but we will be back with another episode shortly after that. A couple of really fun episode ideas that we have lined up. So definitely subscribe if you don't already, or follow us on a podcasting platform. But just wanted to say thank you so much for supporting our show. It truly means a lot. Being in this journey with you has made it so worth it. We love hearing from you guys. It's just so cool that we get to nerd out on all things Disney together. And so we could not be more thankful for that. But we love you guys so much, and we will see you next week for another episode of the Happiest Hour on Earth. We'll see you then. Bye.